Welcome to the Conquering Chronic Illness Show. I'm your host, Daphne Wiswell, the chronic illness coach. And each week, I'm going to be bringing you stories, strategies, and sparks of hope that I pray will encourage you on your journey through life as a conqueror. If illness, mindsets, or other obstacles have held you back from living the life you desire, and you've been looking for real hope, real strategy, and real connection, then you've come to the right place. I'm so glad you're here. Well, hey, y'all, welcome back to the Conquering Chronic Illness Show. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about the power of perspective. In my journey of conquering chronic illness, autoimmune disease, one thing that I've learned as a key strategy. So I'm going to be sharing a story and a strategy in this episode, but a key strategy is changing what I think and what I believe about my current circumstances and about the possibilities for my future circumstances. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The dictionary says that perspective is a particular attitude toward or way of regarding something. And so when I had an attitude of, I'm never going to overcome this, I'm always going to hurt, I'm always going to be, sick and tired of being sick and tired and going to doctor's offices nonstop and having all these tests run and feeling like I'm not making any progress. Like, this is just my life now. I should probably just get used to it. Then that was my reality. But after about 7 years of that and being so over it, I decided that I wanted to shift my perspective. And I didn't really know how to do that, but I knew that I could tap into the mind of the one who could help me. The Bible says that we all have access to the mind of Christ. And so I really started praying and seeking God and asking Him to give me wisdom and strategy for my own journey. I asked Him to just infuse me with the strength and the determination that I needed to conquer this thing called rheumatoid arthritis, because I just couldn't believe. That that was the life that He wanted for me. I couldn't believe that at 26 years old, God said, okay, now it's time for you to be hurting all the time and feel like a terrible mother and not be able to take great care of your kids and, feel overwhelmed and frustrated as a wife. Oh, don't even think about having a career because you're going to be too tired for that and too stressed out. And I couldn't believe that that is what God had planned for me, because the Bible says that God plans to prosper us and not to harm us. And rheumatoid arthritis felt very harmful. And so I knew that it couldn't be what God wanted for me, but I didn't know how to conquer that thing. And so what God led me on was just a journey of discovering how to shift my perspective, how to shift my thinking, how to see things from His point of view, a different vantage point, right? A higher vantage point. If you're standing on flat ground and you're trying to see a far distance away, I don't know how far you can see. I didn't research this before starting this episode, but you're not going to be able to see as far into the distance as if you were standing on a mountaintop. You just have this broader perspective, right? You can see so much further away. And so it shifts everything. And I feel like that's what God gave me, was this ability to begin to see my future the way that He was seeing my future. I believe that He began to show me what His good plans were for me so that I could begin to pray into that. I could begin to believe for that. I could begin to expect that kind of future for myself. And I could begin to take the practical, strategical steps that He was giving me so that I could reach that future. So I'm sitting here today recording this podcast free of rheumatoid arthritis, haven't had a symptom or a medication to treat it in more than 11 years. And thank God. I mean, that's why I feel inspired to create this show, because I know that there are people out there who are feeling the way that I felt then. Like, the only perspective they have, the only perspective you have, is the struggle that you're currently facing, the thing that feels impossible to conquer and overcome. And I just want you to know that you can do it. You can shift your perspective. You can see something different. You can believe for better. And so I want to share one of the stories with you that was so transformational for me. And it comes from Numbers chapter 13 in the Bible. And in this story, God is speaking to Moses, and he's telling Moses to send men to scout out Canaan. And Canaan is a land that he had promised them. And so he says, pick men from all the tribes, and I want them to go scout out the land. And so Moses picks 12 men. But the two noteworthy men from this story, I believe, are Joshua and Caleb. Because what happens is this company of 12 men goes out, and they're gone for 40 days, scouting out the land and seeing, what is the land like? What are the people like? Is everything pleasant or harsh? What do the towns look like? Do they have walls fortifying their camps? Is the soil fertile? Is it barren? They're trying to figure out what this land looks like. So what happens when they come back is a lot of the spies are telling Moses and the rest of the people that the land looks great. It flows with milk and honey. There's fruit. There's, abundance, and the soil is good. But there are giants there, and there's no way that we can conquer them. This is, we ought to just go back. And why didn't we perish in the desert? We should go back to being slaves. They're really whining and complaining because that was their perspective. They saw the goodness of the land God had promised them, but they couldn't see how they could have it because there were giants there that they did not believe they could conquer. And I believe that as someone who battles or has battled chronic autoimmune illness, this is what happens in our minds. We want to dream and believe for bigger and better futures, for healing in our bodies, for healing of our mindsets, but it feels impossible because there are giants in our head. There are lies that we're believing. Maybe we're listening to medical reports that are stating facts. It was a fact at that point in my life that I had rheumatoid arthritis and my joints were deteriorating, and the MRIs proved it, and the blood work proved it, and all of those kinds of things. And so that was a giant in the path of me having what I believe God was promising me. And so I had to conquer that. I had to conquer the thoughts that said, you can't be healthy. You can't conquer this. This is for the rest of your life. Get used to the pain. Those were giants. And I didn't want to live with those giants anymore. So I love what Caleb does, because in the story, Caleb interrupts everyone's whining and complaining and moaning. And he says, let's go up and take the land now. We can do it. So Caleb's perspective, it fascinates me because Caleb saw the same thing that everyone else saw, right? He saw the land flowing with milk and honey. He saw the giants, but in his mind, the only thing to do was to go up and take the land. We can do it. Why? Because God promised it to them. So everyone else is like, no, we can't do it. It's not going to work. They're going to swallow us whole. We felt like grasshoppers, and they look down on us like grasshoppers. These giants are going to be impossible to conquer. And the interesting thing is that I'll just summarize the rest of it for you. Caleb and Joshua, who were the only two of the 12 spies that could see that they could conquer the giants, that they could take the land, they're the only two who actually got to inhabit and inherit the land with their descendants of the 12 spies. And so I believe that it's so crucial in our own journeys that we ask God to show us, okay, where's the goodness? Show us what you have for us. And okay, if there are giants in that area, if there are lies I'm believing, if there are destructive mindsets that want to keep me from walking into this promised land, this healing, this, whatever it is that you might be desiring from God as you're struggling with whatever you're facing currently, God, help me to see that those giants they can't stop me. Jesus says in John 10:10, I came so they can have real and eternal life, more and better life than they ever dreamed of. And Jesus is also the one who taught us to pray on earth as it is in heaven. So I don't think he means we have to wait until we go to heaven to experience the life that he promised us. I think he wants us to have that right now. I'm living that reality right now, free of something that used to really impact my daily life, my function, my ability, my mind. And I truly think that I know, believe that it is because God gave me a different perspective. I had to ask for it, I had to go after it, I had to intentionally pray into it. But eventually, I was able to develop this mindset of, okay, these giants of medical reports and doctor prognosis and everything else that everyone is saying to me, those are giants, but I can conquer those because my God says that he came to give me abundant life. And I choose to see and believe that. And nothing can get in the way of that because he's with me and he's for me and he's with you and he's for you. That's what Romans 8 says. It starts in verse 31. It says, "So what do you think? With God on our side like this, how can we lose?" And then if you go down a little bit, in verse 37, it says, "Yet even in the midst of all these things, we triumph over them all, for God has made us to be more than conquerors, and his demonstrated love is our glorious victory over everything." It says everything. So no matter what struggle you're facing today, no matter how difficult it may seem, no matter how unlikely or impossible, you are more than a conqueror. You have victory over everything. I just want to leave you with one final verse, one of my absolute favorites when it comes to healing and believing for healing and changing my mindset around that. I didn't even notice this verse until, gosh, I don't remember when, but several years into my journey. And it's the story of the woman with the issue of blood, where, first of all, if you don't know about culture and history and all those kinds of things, this woman who had the issue of blood, like in that time and in that culture, a woman who was dealing with an issue like that should not have left her home. She should not have been in public. It was totally taboo. And so for her to even leave her home and be in a public place was one thing. But for her to approach Jesus and touch the hem of his garment was something completely different. This woman was incredibly bold. She was risky. But she did it because she believed in something. She had a higher perspective. She knew that this man had something for her and she wanted to receive it no matter what it cost her. So she touched his robe. And in her mind, in her thoughts, she was saying, if I can put a finger on his robe, I can get well. She believed that if she touched Jesus, she could get well. And it says the moment she did, the flow of blood dried up. She could feel the change and knew her plague was over and done with. And Jesus asked, this is Mark 5:30 is where I'm starting. And Jesus asked who touched him. And, the disciples are like, dozens of people have touched you. What are you talking about? But he felt power leave him. And so he knew something had happened and I believe he wanted the testimony. I believe he wanted other people's faith to be elevated. That's what the power of testimony is other people's faith is elevated when we have a story that we can share of what we've overcome with God. So he kept asking, and the woman knew it was her. And it says she stepped up in fear and trembling, knelt before him, and gave him the whole story. And this is what Jesus says to her in Mark 5:34. I absolutely love this. It says, Jesus said to her, "Daughter, you took a risk of faith, and now you're healed and whole. Live well, live blessed, be healed of your plague." And there's another version of it that I absolutely love. And so I'm going to read that too, because it says, daughter, same verse, Mark 5:34, daughter, because you dared to believe, your faith has healed you. Your faith has healed you, he says. Go with peace in your heart and be free from your suffering. And I believe that what Jesus is saying here is, girl, you had the right perspective. You had faith for this. And that is what transformed you. He didn't say, I'm glad you touched me. Oh, I have healed you. No, he said, daughter, because you dared to believe, your faith has healed you. And so I just want to leave you with that today. And I want to bless you with knowing that if you're in a place right now where you're thinking the way I was thinking, like, God, I just don't even know how healing from this could be possible. Everyone said, this won't work, that won't work. Keep taking your medicine, just get used to it. It just feels impossible. That was a huge giant in my mind. It felt so impossible to even dream about a future where I wasn't in constant pain and fatigue and having limited mobility and not able to enjoy my life. I just couldn't imagine a future that was any different from that. And so what I did was I asked God to show me. I asked God to give me a vision of what that life would be like. What would my days be like? What would my marriage be like? What would my relationship with my kids be like? Would I finally be able to have a career? I'm so grateful I get to do this podcast and that I have the energy to do it and to serve people. And so I just want to leave you with that today. I just want to bless you that if you're in a place right now where it feels impossible to even think about conquering the giant lies in your mind or the giant symptoms in your body, you have access to everything that you need to conquer that thing. And I bless you to know that. I bless you to believe that. I bless you to receive the truth of that so deep in your heart and in your mind and your spirit that you can't help but go after that thing in simple, practical ways. I'm so rooting for you. Thank you for listening to the Conquering Chronic Illness show. I bless you to know that you are more than a conqueror. And if you'd like to get around other women who are on a journey to developing that identity for themselves, that identity of conqueror, then you're invited to join me in my totally free Facebook group called The Conqueror Community. It's a place where you can connect with like-minded conquerors, women who are on a journey of conquering all the things that are threatening to stand in the way of the abundant life Jesus promised them. When you gather in a community of women who are encouraging and uplifting and supportive and full of hope and their own testimonies of conquering, then it fuels your faith to keep going on your own journey. So I hope that I'll see you there.